6 months after my son's wedding, the phone rang in the quiet of the evening, its shrill tone cutting through the comfortable hum of the Monroe household. Clarence Monroe, 70, bald-headed with a medium-length grey beard, had been sitting in his study reviewing bills and personal notes in his meticulous, almost meditative routine. The calm of the room, illuminated by the soft golden hue of the desk lamp, was suddenly pierced by the unexpected urgency in the caller's voice. "Sir, this is David, the photographer from the wedding," came the trembling voice on the other line. I found something in the photos. You need to see this before telling your son." Clarence's brow furrowed slightly, but his expression remained composed. He had faced crises before, moments of chaos that demanded calm, measured responses. His hand rested lightly on the phone, his long grey beard catching the warm light, his eyes calm yet piercing with anticipation. He knew in that instant that whatever David had uncovered was no trivial matter. There was weight in the voice of the man who had captured every memory of the wedding with precision and care. 6 months had passed since Darius Monroe's lavish wedding to his new bride, Naomi. The celebration had been grand, the guests numerous and the photographs impeccable. Clarence had maintained a quiet presence throughout the ceremony, observing, guiding subtly but never overtly imposing himself. The photographer, David, had been professional, meticulous, and trustworthy. And now his call suggested that something had been overlooked, or worse, intentionally hidden. Clarence felt a chill run down his spine, not from fear but from a deep, instinctive knowledge that the quiet life he thought he had maintained could be disrupted in an instant. He had raised Darius with care, teaching lessons in patience, dignity, and respect. Yet life had a way of revealing hidden truths at the most unexpected times. His hand, steady and assured, dialed a number he hadn't needed to use since the wedding, a number for David, the man who had captured the day that had seemed perfect. "David, tell me exactly what you found," Clarence said, his voice calm but firm, the kind of calm that made people pause, listen, and weigh their words carefully. "There are photos, sir," David stammered. "I noticed something behind your son and daughter-in-law in one of the candid shots. At first I thought it was a trick of the light or perhaps a shadow, but when I reviewed the entire album it became clear. It's not what anyone would expect. It's going to hurt when you see it." Clarence Monroe did not react outwardly. His calm was not a mask but a tool, a way to navigate the unpredictable. He sensed the gravity of the situation, yet he did not panic. He arranged to meet David at a quiet cafe nearby, a neutral place where the conversation could unfold without interruption or observation. As he drove, memories of the wedding swirled through his mind. The joy of his son Darius in his tailored tuxedo, Naomi in her pristine gown, the laughter of friends and family, the clinking of champagne glasses, the careful choreography of a day designed to create perfect memories. Yet now, in the span of a phone call, Clarence's serene recollections were threatened by the possibility of a hidden truth, a secret captured in the lens of a camera. When he arrived at the cafe, David was already there, hands shaking slightly as he fumbled with a laptop bag. Clarence Monroe remained seated, posture straight, eyes calm, studying the man before him. He gestured for David to open the laptop, and the photos appeared, vibrant, candid, the energy of the wedding captured in brilliant clarity. Then Clarence saw it. A figure lurking in the background, almost imperceptible yet unmistakable. Naomi's expression in one particular frame, a subtle glance, a fleeting smile, suggested a moment of intimacy, a detail that could not have been staged, a truth that had been frozen in time without anyone noticing. The photograph revealed an interaction, a subtle yet unmistakable gesture that shattered the narrative Clarence had believed about his family, about trust, and about the sanctity of the wedding day. The weight of the revelation pressed upon him like a physical force. His calm demeanor, honed over decades, did not falter outwardly, but inside a storm of emotion surged, disbelief, sorrow, and a quiet, simmering anger. He looked at David, whose eyes betrayed guilt, apprehension, and regret. "Sir, I didn't know whether to tell you," David whispered. "I wasn't sure how." Clarence Monroe held up a hand, a gesture that immediately calmed the trembling photographer. "I needed to know," he said quietly. "I needed to see for myself. And now I have this changes everything. Darius Monroe, oblivious to the storm gathering in his father's mind, was at work that afternoon, blissfully unaware that the foundation of his life, built on trust, appearances and carefully curated moments, might already be shifting. Clarence in that moment made a silent vow. The truth would be revealed in a way that honored his wisdom, patience, and dignity. There would be no rash action, no public confrontation without purpose, no immediate indulgence in anger. The photograph was more than an image. It was a catalyst, a spark that would ignite a reckoning. Clarence's mind, steady and precise, began plotting the path forward. Every action, every choice would be deliberate, ensuring that the lesson, not just the revelation, would carry the weight it deserved. In the calm light of the cafe, with the photographs laid out before him, Clarence Monroe understood that justice, patience, and quiet strategy were the most powerful tools at his disposal. And as he closed the laptop, sealing the moment in memory, he whispered to himself, "Some truths are meant to be revealed at the perfect moment, and that moment has arrived." The drive back from the cafe was unusually quiet. Clarence Monroe's hands gripped the steering wheel lightly, yet there was a tension in his posture that spoke of the storm gathering in his mind. Outside, the city moved as usual, cars honking, people hurrying, streetlights flickering. But within the car, time seemed to stretch, each moment heavy with the weight of revelation. The photograph, now etched into his memory, replayed in vivid detail. Naomi's fleeting glance, a gesture so subtle it could have been missed by anyone, yet captured forever by the lens. Clarence's mind, trained over decades to assess, anticipate, and strategize, began to trace the implications. He considered his son Darius, so confident, so self-assured, unaware that a shadow now loomed over his carefully constructed life. Darius, who had shouted and mocked, who had demanded independence and control over his marriage, would soon be confronted not by his father's anger, but by the inescapable weight of truth. Clarence knew that any hasty action would lessen the lesson. Timing, subtlety, and strategy were crucial. He arrived home just as the sun began its descent, casting long golden streaks across the driveway. The Monroe residence, immaculate and serene, seemed unchanged, yet the calm exterior masked the undercurrents about to ripple through the household. Clarence entered silently, leaving the car door gently closed behind him, as though the universe itself acknowledged his quiet authority. Inside, he found Darius and Naomi laughing softly in the living room, unaware that their lives were teetering on the edge of exposure. Clarence paused at the doorway, observing. Darius's laughter, confident and loud, echoed through the house, a stark contrast to the tremor of unease that had begun to settle over Clarence's thoughts. Naomi, radiant and poised, adjusted her dress, completely unaware of the subtle misstep frozen in the photographs months ago. Clarence approached, calm and composed, his presence immediately commanding attention. He did not raise his voice. He did not confront or accuse. Instead, he chose the most powerful tool in his arsenal, silence. His gaze lingered on Darius, piercing yet measured, communicating authority without a single word. Darius's confidence faltered slightly, sensing the unspoken gravity emanating from his father. Naomi too noticed the change, tilting her head, unsure of the sudden intensity in Clarence's demeanor. After a brief pause, Clarence spoke, his voice steady, deliberate, and calm. "David called today." The words hung in the air, simple yet loaded, carrying the weight of months of oversight, observation, and a secret he had now fully grasped. Darius froze mid-laugh, a subtle flicker of unease crossing his face. Naomi looked at Clarence, curiosity mingling with concern, sensing that the statement held more significance than the casual tone suggested. "What do you mean, Dad?" Darius asked, trying to mask the flicker of worry creeping into his voice. "What happened?" Clarence did not answer immediately. He let the silence stretch, each second amplifying tension, magnifying the anticipation, until Darius's own imagination began to conjure scenarios far worse than reality. Finally, Clarence spoke again, carefully measured. "There are things you need to see. Things that were captured long ago before any of us knew. David, the photographer, discovered it. I saw it myself. It changes the understanding of some moments you thought were private." Darius's face paled. A bead of sweat formed at his temple. Naomi's hand instinctively reached for his arm, sensing the shift, unsure whether to brace or question. Clarence's calm presence was magnetic, unyielding. It pulled the anxiety to the surface, made it impossible to ignore. "Dad, what are you saying?" Darius stammered, trying to control the rising panic. He had believed that the past 6 months were secure, that the memories captured in photographs were mere decorations for family albums. He had not imagined that one subtle gesture, one unnoticed detail, could now hold the power to destabilize his life. Clarence leaned slightly forward, the long grey beard catching the fading sunlight like strands of steel, strength and patience. "I am saying," he began, his voice steady, "that some truths, when revealed at the right moment, cannot be ignored. They demand reflection, understanding, and sometimes confrontation. The images show something subtle but undeniable, something you must face before it faces you." Darius felt a wave of dread. His confident, arrogant demeanor cracked. For the first time since adulthood, he felt the vulnerability of being watched, measured, and assessed by someone whose patience and insight dwarfed his own impulsiveness. Naomi clutched his arm tighter, her expression a mixture of worry and disbelief. Sensing the tension between father and son, yet unsure of the reason behind it, Clarence continued, calmly, almost softly, "I am not here to yell, to punish or to humiliate. That power is already evident in the consequences of your actions and decisions. But you must be prepared. What you will see will challenge what you believe about trust, loyalty, and the choices we make in life." The room grew still. Even the ticking clock seemed hushed, as if time itself was holding its breath. Darius's heart raced. Every instinct screamed panic, yet every fiber of his being acknowledged the weight and precision in Clarence Monroe's approach. The long grey beard, the calm posture, and the deliberate control conveyed a message more potent than any confrontation. The consequences were inevitable, and the revelation could not be avoided. Clarence reached for the photograph folder David had sent electronically, handing it to Darius without a word. The young man's hands shook as he opened it. Each image scrolled by, normal at first, smiles, embraces, candid laughter, until the one frame appeared, subtle yet undeniable. Naomi's gaze lingered on someone behind Darius, an intimate expression he had never noticed. The moment was fleeting, but it existed, frozen in the lens forever. Darius's confidence crumbled, replaced by shock and disbelief. Naomi gasped softly, covering her mouth, realizing the significance of the captured moment. Clarence Monroe stood behind them, silent, patient, observing the first tremors of comprehension ripple through his son and daughter-in-law. He did not need to explain further. The photograph, the timing, the precise orchestration of revelation was enough. By the time the first tears formed in Darius's eyes, Clarence's calm authority had already set the tone. The young man realized that the reckoning had begun, not through anger, not through force, but through the unyielding precision and patience of a father who had always seen further than his son. The quiet in the room was deafening. The weight of realization, the moral clarity, and the shattering of illusions enveloped the Monroes. Clarence Monroe knew that the next steps would unfold naturally. The consequences, the lessons, and the emotional confrontation would follow, but all in their own perfect timing, guided by the deliberate hand of wisdom and foresight. The rest of the evening passed in a strange, almost surreal tension. Darius Monroe sat frozen on the edge of the sofa, staring at the photograph over and over, each glance magnifying the gravity of the revelation. Naomi hovered nearby, her hands clasped in front of her, eyes darting between Darius and Clarence Monroe. Neither spoke, yet every second of silence was charged with unspoken emotion, disbelief, shame, and the dawning realization that the life they had taken for granted was suddenly fragile and exposed. Clarence Monroe remained standing, his long, grey beard catching the soft amber glow of the lamp, a symbol of calm authority and the patience of decades. He did not need to speak. His presence alone conveyed that the consequences of what had been discovered would unfold with precision. Darius's pride, which had seemed invincible moments ago, now lay shattered. Every action he had taken since the wedding, every assumption about trust and loyalty felt suddenly hollow. Naomi finally found her voice soft and tremulous. "Darius, did you—" She couldn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. The photograph had revealed a truth neither could ignore, yet it was subtle enough that in their ordinary routines no one had noticed. Yet now the revelation pressed upon them like a weight too heavy to bear. Darius tried to speak, but words failed him. His throat felt dry, his tongue heavy with disbelief. I don't understand. I thought... His voice trailed off. He had believed in the perfection of appearances, the safety of the curated moments captured on camera, but now he understood that truth existed beyond what he could control. The images were evidence, undeniable and unalterable. Clarence Monroe finally broke the silence, his tone calm but deliberate. You cannot undo what has been captured, Darius, nor can you avoid the consequences of actions you may have ignored or overlooked. The photograph is a reflection of reality, not interpretation. Your life, your marriage, your choices, they are all subject to accountability. The room seemed to shrink around Darius. Every sound, from the hum of the refrigerator to the faint traffic outside, became amplified in his mind. He felt trapped in the weight of truth, unable to escape the sudden exposure of his life. Naomi, sensing his vulnerability, reached for his hand, but he recoiled slightly, as if the physical touch might bring the revelation even closer. Impossible to deny. Clarence Monroe observed silently, allowing the lesson to take hold. He knew that confrontation was not necessary. The photograph itself, combined with the careful timing of its revelation, would teach what words could never convey. The young couple's reactions, fear, guilt, confusion, and dawning comprehension, were exactly the tools Clarence needed to guide the unfolding consequences. Hours passed, yet the atmosphere remained taut. Darius eventually sank further into the sofa, head in hands, feeling the collapse of certainty and control. Naomi sat beside him, equally silent, yet the tension between them grew as unspoken questions loomed. Who was involved? What did the gesture mean? Could trust ever be restored? Clarence Monroe, still standing, allowed the silence to deepen. Each breath, each tick of the clock, reinforced his authority, the inevitability of the consequences, and the clarity of the lesson. He did not need to yell. He did not need to demand explanations. The photograph, paired with his patient observation, had already begun reshaping the family dynamic. Finally, Clarence spoke again, slowly and deliberately. Truth is not always convenient, and reality is not always kind. What you see before you is only a fraction of the choices, actions, and moments that shape life. Do not underestimate the subtlety of consequences. His voice carried a weight that made Darius flinch. It was not anger, it was inevitability. Darius's thoughts raced. He realized that his arrogance, his dismissiveness toward his father's wisdom, and his preoccupation with appearances had blinded him. He had believed that he could control every aspect of his life, but now he understood that truth has a way of emerging, unbidden and unstoppable. Naomi's eyes met his, a mixture of fear, guilt, and confusion, as if the silent accusation of the photograph extended beyond him to their marriage. Clarence Monroe finally turned, walking slowly toward the doorway. Reflect on what you've seen. Consider your choices carefully. Tomorrow we will discuss this further, but for now, let it settle. Let the gravity of this moment speak louder than words ever could. As he left the room, Darius remained slumped, silent and trembling. Naomi followed, unsure whether to console or confront, yet equally aware that the father's calm authority had already reshaped the balance of power. The photograph, once innocuous, had become a weapon of truth, and the lessons embedded in it were unavoidable. Darius's pride had crumbled, Naomi's confidence had been shaken. Clarence Monroe's silent strategy, executed with precision, had ensured that the revelation carried maximum impact. The father's patience, his medium-length grey beard gleaming softly in the fading light, was a symbol of the authority that no outburst, no denial, and no concealment could ever overcome. By nightfall, the couple sat together in tense silence. Every glance, every small movement, reminded Darius that the photograph was not just an image. It was a judgment, and every judgment delivered with calm precision, patience, and foresight is more powerful than anger, shouting, or force. Clarence Monroe had proven this yet again. Wisdom and quiet strategy can dismantle arrogance, expose truth, and deliver poetic justice without ever raising a hand. As the city lights flickered outside their window, Darius and Naomi sat in the heavy shadow of revelation. The evening stretched long, each moment forcing reflection, each breath carrying the weight of accountability. Clarence Monroe had not spoken much, yet his presence, his timing, and his deliberate silence had already begun to reshape not just the lives of his son and daughter-in-law, but the moral fabric of their decisions. And somewhere in the quiet, Darius realized that the reckoning had only just begun. The photograph had set the wheels in motion, and Clarence Monroe's patient strategy ensured that every consequence would be felt, internalized, and remembered for the rest of their lives. The next morning, the house was heavy with quiet tension. Darius Monroe awoke first, staring at the ceiling as the weight of the previous night's revelations pressed upon him. Naomi lay beside him, eyes wide, her expression a mixture of fear, confusion, and dawning comprehension. Neither spoke immediately. The room seemed too fragile to hold sound. Even the sunlight streaming through the curtains seemed cautious, as though it too sensed the gravity of the unspoken truth that had reshaped their lives. Darius eventually rose, moving to the window with slow, deliberate steps, avoiding Naomi's questioning gaze. The photographs from the wedding, innocuous to the untrained eye, now haunted him like spectral echoes of mistakes long buried. Each frame held a subtle hint of a moment he had overlooked, a gesture frozen in time, and one photograph in particular, the one David had insisted he see, carried the weight of inevitability. It was not just a picture. It was a verdict delivered with the impartiality of a lens that captured life exactly as it had occurred. Naomi approached, soft footsteps on the polished wooden floor. "Darius," she began, her voice tentative, afraid of provoking further despair. We need to talk about this." But Darius could barely meet her gaze. His hands shook slightly as he held the photograph folder, turning it over and over. The calm precision of Clarence Monroe, his father, lingered in Darius's mind. That quiet authority, that patient, unyielding wisdom, had orchestrated a revelation that left no room for argument, denial, or evasion. Clarence Monroe, bald-headed with his medium-length grey beard catching the morning sunlight, entered the room with his usual measured step. He did not raise his voice, did not gesture impatiently. His presence alone was a force. Darius flinched slightly as the weight of his father's gaze fell upon him. The calm eyes, steady and unwavering, made him feel exposed in a way that no confrontation, no shouting, and no denial could ever achieve. "Sit," Clarence said simply. His voice, quiet but firm, resonated with authority that commanded attention without aggression. Darius lowered himself into the chair near the window, the photograph folder resting heavily on his lap. Naomi stood nearby, hands clasped, unsure whether to intervene or remain silent. "You have seen the evidence," Clarence began, his tone measured, deliberate. "It is not my role to dictate your reaction. The truth is evident. What is left is for you to comprehend, internalize, and face the consequences of your choices." His eyes lingered on Darius, and the subtle pause that followed emphasized the weight of every word. Darius felt the immense gravity of the moment pressing down on him. For all his confidence, for all his pride, the calm authority of his father left him exposed, humbled, and vulnerable. Darius finally spoke, his voice hoarse, almost a whisper. I didn't see it, Dad. I didn't think..." His words trailed off into helplessness. Naomi shifted slightly, her own voice trembling. "Darius, we need to understand what this means. What do we do now?" Clarence remained seated opposite them, his posture relaxed yet commanding. Understanding comes first, reflection comes next, and action, and when necessary, is always guided by clarity, not impulse. You will have time to process what has been revealed. But know this, actions, even when hidden, have consequences. Choices, even when subtle, cannot escape the light of truth. Darius felt a surge of emotion, shame, fear, and a reluctant acknowledgement of his own arrogance. The calm authority of Clarence Monroe, who had endured years of disrespect and impatience from his son, now had the power to reshape not just this moment, but the trajectory of his life. Naomi's gaze, filled with apprehension, shifted to Darius, as if silently urging him to confront reality rather than evade it. For hours, they sat in the quiet of the room. The photograph displayed on the table became a focal point, a mirror reflecting not only a past event but the hidden patterns of choices and consequences that defined their lives. Darius's confidence, once so unshakable, had fractured. Naomi too felt the tremors of revelation, understanding that life's perfection is fragile, and the truth once captured can reshape everything. By late afternoon, Clarence stood and walked slowly to the window, gazing outward as if observing the world beyond, yet fully aware of the storm brewing within his own home. Time, he said softly, has a way of revealing what is hidden, and patience allows the truth to speak for itself. His words, calm and deliberate, carried the quiet threat of inevitability, the recognition that the truth once seen cannot be ignored, and those who had acted carelessly must now face the consequences. Darius and Naomi exchanged a glance, a mixture of fear, guilt, and understanding. The reckoning was not over, and Clarence Monroe's measured strategy meant that the unfolding consequences would continue to shape their actions, decisions, and future. Each moment of silence, each subtle gesture carried more weight than words could convey. By evening, the house was steeped in reflection. Darius, still tense, finally lowered his head, realizing that confrontation alone could never replace the lessons embedded in observation, evidence, and the patient guidance of a father whose wisdom surpassed fleeting emotion. Naomi too sat quietly, the significance of the photograph settling in her mind, her eyes reflecting both remorse and awareness of the fragility of appearances. Clarence Monroe, medium-length grey beard softly illuminated by the last rays of sunlight, observed them both silently. The lesson had begun. The revelation, carefully timed and delivered, had achieved its initial purpose, awakening humility, reflection, and accountability. The poetic justice inherent in the discovery was subtle yet powerful. He had not yelled. He had not demanded confession. Yet through calm observation and patient strategy, he had ensured that truth would ripple through the lives of his family, irrevocably altering their understanding of trust, loyalty, and the consequences of actions overlooked. The evening settled into heavy silence. The room seemed almost sacred, the air thick with the weight of unspoken truths. Clarence knew that the subsequent days would require patience, guidance, and further revelation, but the foundation of accountability had been firmly established. Every look, every gesture, every heartbeat carried the resonance of justice, carefully orchestrated and deeply felt. As darkness fell, Darius and Naomi sat together, the photograph folder open between them. Their world had shifted in subtle yet irreversible ways. Clarence Monroe's calm authority and quiet strategy had created a turning point, a moment where humility, truth, and reflection would shape the family's next steps. The father's medium-length grey beard, a symbol of endurance, patience, and wisdom, caught the last light of day, a silent reminder that time, observation and careful action often speak louder than anger, confrontation, or shouting. The following morning, Darius Monroe woke with a heavy sense of dread pressing on his chest. Every thought he had carried about his life, his marriage, and the careful image he had curated, now felt like fragile glass, ready to shatter at the slightest touch. Naomi stirred beside him, her eyes wide and anxious, mirroring the storm raging silently in his mind. Both of them knew, without needing to speak, that the photograph from 6 months ago had changed everything. Clarence Monroe entered the room with his characteristic calm authority. His medium-length grey beard framed a face that radiated patience, strength, and quiet wisdom. He had not raised his voice since the discovery. He had not made threats. Yet the weight of his presence alone was enough to make Darius's heart race. Every action of his father, every deliberate step, every measured pause, communicated the consequences that were now inevitable. "Darius, Naomi," Clarence began, his tone calm, deliberate, and unshakable. "Today will be different. What has been revealed is not simply an image. It is a reflection of choices and actions. The truth exists regardless of comfort or convenience, and now it will guide your next steps." Darius swallowed hard, sweat forming at his temples. "Dad, what do you mean? What's going to happen?" His voice cracked slightly, the first real admission of fear since adulthood. Naomi reached out instinctively, but he recoiled, feeling as if even touch might accelerate the consequences he could not escape. Clarence's eyes softened, yet remained piercing. You will see, Darius, but first you must understand that this moment is not about punishment. It is about accountability. And accountability has its own way of manifesting, often in forms we do not anticipate. The morning passed slowly. Clarence maintained his calm demeanor, yet subtle actions hinted at consequences being set in motion. A few phone calls were made quietly, discreetly, orchestrating events that would soon ripple through Darius's world. Each call, each message, invisible yet deliberate, was a part of a larger design, a lesson delivered without anger, but with absolute precision. By noon, Darius began to notice small but unmistakable disruptions. His professional commitments were interrupted by urgent messages he could not ignore. Clients cancelled meetings at the last minute. Payments he had expected suddenly required verification. Naomi's phone buzzed repeatedly, and each alert seemed to carry the weight of an unseen hand guiding events. The couple's carefully structured lives were subtly, unrelentingly unraveling. Darius tried to maintain control, but every attempt failed. His pride, once a fortress, crumbled under the pressure of events he could neither predict nor prevent. Naomi watched in helpless frustration, realizing that the photograph had become far more than an image. It was a fulcrum that could tip the balance of their lives. Clarence Monroe remained calm, observing from a distance. His long years of experience, patience, and strategic insight allowed him to orchestrate consequences without confrontation. Each ripple of disruption was timed perfectly, ensuring that the lesson was internalized, unavoidable, and deeply felt. Darius's arrogance, his dismissiveness, and his preoccupation with appearances were being dismantled, not by force, but by the inevitability of truth in motion. By late afternoon, the culmination of Clarence's strategy became evident. Darius's phone rang incessantly. Emails and messages piled up, demanding attention he could not give. Naomi received calls from colleagues and friends, each conversation punctuated by awkward inquiries and revelations she could not fully explain. The meticulous life they had built since the wedding was now in chaos, a direct consequence of choices long overlooked, and the subtle, deliberate orchestration of Clarence Monroe. Darius felt the first genuine pangs of desperation. "Dad, this can't be happening." His voice was a mixture of anger, disbelief, and fear. Naomi tried to calm him, but her own frustration was apparent. Every action taken to maintain appearances was now thwarted by the precision of Clarence's strategy. Clarence approached, silent, his medium-length grey beard catching the fading sunlight. He did not speak immediately. He simply observed, allowing the young couple to feel the full weight of the consequences he had orchestrated. When he finally spoke, his words were measured, deliberate, and devastating in their quiet authority. The photograph revealed a truth that existed unnoticed. "It is not punishment that unfolds now, Darius. It is the natural course of reality, guided by the consequences of choices. What you see around you, the disruptions, the chaos, the unraveling of certainty, is not an accident. It is a reflection of what occurs when actions, even subtle ones, are ignored or dismissed." Darius's hands trembled as he clutched the photograph folder. Every image replayed in his mind. Naomi's fleeting glance, the gesture captured long ago, now fully understood. His arrogance, pride, and blind confidence had blinded him to consequences that were inevitable. Naomi's eyes reflected the same dawning comprehension, and a shared, unspoken understanding settled between them. The life they had thought secure was now vulnerable, exposed and at the mercy of truth. As the evening progressed, Clarence Monroe's strategy reached its climax. The disruptions intensified, yet each consequence was precise, deliberate, and aligned with the lessons he intended to teach. Darius was forced to confront not only the immediate fallout, but also the pattern of choices that had led him here. Naomi, equally affected, could no longer ignore the subtle missteps and lapses in judgment that had contributed to the revelation. By nightfall, the couple sat together in tense silence, the weight of realization pressing on them like a tangible force. Clarence Monroe, standing near the doorway, his medium-length grey beard illuminated softly by the remaining light, observed with calm authority. He did not need to intervene further. The lesson had been delivered. The consequences were undeniable, immediate and unavoidable. Darius finally spoke, voice broken and heavy with remorse. "Dad, I understand now. I see everything. Naomi nodded silently, her expression a mix of guilt, fear, and reflection. Clarence's calm, deliberate presence conveyed a final, unspoken message. Truth, patience, and strategic action always prevail over arrogance and ignorance. As the night deepened, the couple reflected on the events orchestrated with such quiet precision. The photograph, once innocuous, had become the catalyst for accountability, humility, and a deeper understanding of choices and consequences. Clarence Monroe's strategic patience and calm authority had ensured that the lesson was unforgettable, not through anger, not through shouting, but through the inexorable weight of truth, revealed at exactly the right moment. By the time the house fell silent, Darius and Naomi knew their lives would never be the same. The careful balance of arrogance and confidence had been shattered. The lesson, orchestrated by a father's patience and wisdom, was complete. And in the quiet of the night, Clarence Monroe's medium-length grey beard reflected the faint light, a symbol of endurance, authority, and the quiet power of deliberate action. The next morning, the air in the Monroe household was thick with anticipation. Darius Monroe had barely slept, his mind spinning endlessly over the revelations from the photographs and the chain of disruptions that Clarence Monroe had orchestrated over the past few days. Naomi sat beside him, eyes red from worry and sleepless nights, yet glimmering with the dawning realization of accountability and consequences. Clarence Monroe, bald-headed with a medium-length grey beard, moved quietly through the house, observing without intrusion. Each step, each subtle gesture carried the weight of decades of wisdom. The father's presence was a force in itself, commanding attention without demanding it, reminding Darius that authority, patience, and insight could reshape lives more powerfully than anger or confrontation. Darius finally rose, his shoulders slumped, the arrogance of youth replaced by genuine fear and remorse. "Dad, I understand now," he whispered, his voice heavy with the weight of self-realization. Naomi reached for his hand, offering silent support, yet neither could escape the gravity of the lessons Clarence had orchestrated. Clarence remained calm, his eyes piercing yet gentle. "Understanding is only the first step," he said softly. "Acknowledgement, reflection, and change follow. Today you will confront the culmination of what has been set in motion." Without further words, Clarence led Darius and Naomi to the living room, where a quiet commotion was already unfolding. Outside the large window, the street had begun to fill with people, friends, family, and colleagues, all aware of Darius's missteps through subtle but deliberate messages Clarence had arranged. Each person carried a calm but expectant presence, waiting for the young man to acknowledge the consequences of his arrogance. Darius's eyes widened. The carefully curated life he had taken for granted was now visible to the community he had believed would never challenge him. Naomi's hand squeezed his gently, a reminder that the revelations affected both of them. The photograph, once merely a record of a moment in time, had become the catalyst for public accountability, subtle yet undeniable. Clarence's voice cut through the tension, calm and deliberate. "Darius, Naomi, every choice has repercussions. Every action, no matter how small, can ripple outward and touch lives in ways you may not anticipate. Today you will witness the culmination of that truth." From inside the house, the couple watched as the first of Clarence's carefully orchestrated consequences unfolded. Colleagues who had once praised Darius now approached with measured concern, gently highlighting inconsistencies and oversights he had ignored. Friends offered quiet admonishments, each comment reinforcing the lesson that pride and arrogance, left unchecked, inevitably invite reckoning. Naomi observed the unfolding events with a mixture of relief and anxiety. The lesson was painful but necessary. She realized that her complicity in overlooking subtle missteps had contributed to the situation. The weight of accountability was shared, yet each lesson delivered was deliberate, measured, and instructive. Darius felt a sinking sensation in his chest. Every glance, every comment, every observation from the assembled community amplified the lessons Clarence had orchestrated. He realized that the consequences he faced were not random or vindictive, but the natural culmination of choices, actions and hidden truths revealed at precisely the right moment. By afternoon, the impact of Clarence's strategy was undeniable. Darius's confidence, once unshakable, had fractured completely. Naomi's composure, though shaken, reflected awareness and understanding. The photograph, combined with deliberate timing, had achieved its intended purpose: accountability, humility, and the profound recognition of consequences. Clarence finally spoke, his voice carrying calm authority. Truth has a way of revealing itself when the time is right. The lessons you have received are not punishment, but guidance. They are meant to illuminate the path forward, not merely chastise. Learn from them, internalize them, and act with integrity henceforth. Darius fell to his knees, tears streaming freely. "Dad, I'm sorry. I see everything now. I promise to do better." Naomi embraced him quietly, her own eyes brimming with emotion. The lessons were searing, yet they were fair, delivered with precision and patience rather than rage. Outside, the assembled group of friends, colleagues, and family witnessed the quiet culmination of Clarence Monroe's strategy. There was no shouting, no confrontation, only the undeniable reality of accountability, humility, and justice executed with subtlety and insight. The ripple of poetic justice spread, leaving an indelible mark on Darius and Naomi's lives. By evening, the house settled into an almost sacred calm. Darius and Naomi reflected on the past days, the revelations and the consequences. The photograph, once innocuous, had reshaped their understanding of life, relationships, and choices. Clarence Monroe, medium-length grey beard catching the last rays of sunlight, observed silently. His patience, wisdom, and strategic foresight had ensured that truth, humility, and accountability prevailed. The final lesson was clear. Arrogance and pride cannot withstand patience, observation, and the quiet orchestration of justice. Clarence Monroe had demonstrated, through calm authority and deliberate strategy, that actions always have consequences, and that true power lies not in shouting or force but in timing, precision, and insight. As night fell, the household was enveloped in reflection. Darius and Naomi knew their lives had changed irrevocably. The lessons would linger, shaping their choices, their integrity, and their awareness of consequences for years to come. Clarence Monroe, ever calm, ever wise, had delivered poetic justice, quiet, unassailable, and profoundly transformative. And in the silence of the night, Darius whispered, "Dad." "Thank you." But Clarence Monroe only smiled softly, his eyes reflecting the enduring calm and authority of a man who had guided lives without ever raising his voice. A testament to wisdom, patience, and the quiet power of deliberate action.